What is up, yo? This is Gift speaking. Welcome to what you are on the Gift Effect. And today we're looking at how you can get creative with text. And we're going to explore 5 different ways of how you can approach your next text-based project. You know, sometimes you get a brief and they say, hey, can you make an animated social media post with this text? And a lot of the time we resort to fade in and fade out. Sometimes when we're feeling lazy, we just even cut to the text and then we cut out of the text. It happens, but after this video, you'll have 5 different ideas of how you can approach your next text animation project. Assuming you want to leave the fade in and fade out to the screenwriters. Let's jump in.
So I've got my text here at the center of my composition and I'm ready to start adding some animations into my text, right? So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna toggle down on my text layer, and then I'm gonna into this little button here that has animate on it. I'm just gonna click there and instantly you'll see that you've got a whole bunch of properties there that you can kind of add to your animation, right? So I'm gonna go with position, and then I'm gonna add another property, maybe opacity. So I have position and I have opacity to kind of animate on my text. So all right, so I'm gonna move forward in time, maybe to like 20 frames. So one thing to keep in mind about text animation specifically is that usually you're trying to create animation to something that is already on your composition. And in my case is this text here, and usually you would have maybe a storyboard that was created in Photoshop or a storyboard that was created in Illustrator. So in any case, what you want to do is to animate backwards. So what that means is that the frame that your scene comes in usually is the last frame, right? So in my case, for example, this is what my text is supposed to look like when it's done animating. So I'm just gonna create a little line there just under my text so that I can know the position of my text, like the final, basically the final standpoint of my text. So in this case, I'm just going to keep it there so that when I start messing around with my position, I can remember where that text is supposed to be, right? Cool. So I'm going to start messing around with my position now. So I'm going to keyframe it so that the end keyframe stores the data of the position at 20 frames. So I'm going to move backwards in time, maybe to about 4 frames, and then I'm going to start messing up with my position. So I want my text to animate from the bottom, and then so that at 20 frames when it's done animating, it's in that same position that is kind of supposed to be in when it's done animating. So if I scrub through my timeline here, you can see already that there's a bit of movement going on in my composition, basically, right? So I want to add a bit more personality to the text, to the animation that is happening to my text. So the one way for me to do that obviously is to kind of like explore these properties that I've added into my text layer and see how I can start messing around with the properties values and some of the things that they kind of have you know, under these drop down menus that they have, right? So I'm gonna pause that quickly, and then I'm gonna explore my range selector here, and then immediately you'll see that I'm presented with 3 options. I've got start, end, and I've got offset. So I'm gonna start messing around with the offset and say at 20 frames when my text is animated and is kind of over that line, I want the offset to be 100%, right? And then I'm gonna move backwards in time to when my text has an animated at 0 frames, and then I'm gonna take that offset to -100, right? So now I've got these values. I've got 4 keyframes on my timeline, and it doesn't seem like a lot has changed on my text. I've added a new set of keyframes here at the top, but it doesn't seem like they've done anything, right? So if I start to scrub through my timeline, you'll see that there's some movement happening on the text, right? And part of it is interesting because it's kind of remember at first we had just the text going upwards. So now you can see that these letters are kind of animating independently and they're all rising up at different times, right? So I kind of like what's happening, but at the moment it feels like I don't have control over what's happening, because between these two keyframes there's a whole lot of movement that is happening and I kind of don't have control. If, like, for example, if I want maybe, you know, if I don't like that movement, you know, there is no other keyframe here, it's just the start and the end, but it seems like there's an additional movement happening here in between where the text kind of dips down, kind of from the top, it kind of dips down and then it goes back upwards. But I don't want that. I want all my text to kind of animate from the bottom and then go back to just above this line here where it's supposed to be in the end, right? So for me to do that, I have to go under advanced, and then you'll see that there's this option here, shape, that has square in it, and it's got like a drop down menu as well. So if I click on that and I choose ramp up, so it doesn't seem like anything has changed again, but if I click this the play button, you'll see that the text is now animating from the bottom, right? So, which is cool. So at the moment you can see that at the beginning of your time frame, you can still see at 0 seconds, basically you can still see the text that is gonna animate and ultimately be on your composition at around 1 second or so. So I don't want to see that text at the beginning. I only want to see it at the end, and I want to see the animation that happens in between, right? So this is where that opacity variable comes in handy, that we added earlier when we added the position property. So this comes in very handy, and what I can do also with it is that I can just move to the beginning of my time here at 0 seconds, and then I'm gonna move that to 0. You'll see instantly that my text has disappeared because of the opacity property that I've just turned now to 0, right? So the cool thing is that if I scrub through this timeline, you'll see that without even having to keyframe this opacity keyframe, there will be some animation happening to the opacity, right? And that is because of this ramp up animation that I have happening here. So this affects the entire animation of the text. If I press my play button, I've got an interesting animation happening that has only been created with 4 keyframes. So if you want, you can select everything and kind of easy ease everything so that, you know, you have like a bit of a smoother movement with your text. So this is one way of how you can approach your next text project that requires animation, and this is how you can basically start, you know, playing around with your text animations and start including into your project. So with our next text animation, I already have my text here at the center of my composition, and we're basically just going to start animating. So it's going to be kind of a similar approach that we did in the previous project, where we go under, you know, our text layer here. We just drop down on that, and then we go under animate, and then we're gonna click on position, right? So before we start messing around with our position properties here, the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna create a shape layer, and then again, I'm just gonna press Command R so I can bring up my rulers. So what this does basically is to guide me on where my text animates, and so that I can remember the position also of where I want my text to be when it's done animating. So with that text layer that I've created, I'm just gonna quickly rename that and say text shape, right? Something like that. And then I'm gonna draw like a rectangle over my text, and then I'm gonna make sure that the shape covers my text entirely so that I don't see any text besides the shape that is in my composition. And then the second thing I want to do so that I can get it to work with this text shape in a way that I want it to, I'm just going to toggle down here on the button, and then so I can bring up my my alpha matte option. So what that means is I'm going to choose that. I'm going to choose the alpha matte position, and what that does is that it reveals my text through the shape that was on my composition. So the shape layer is still there, but you can't see it because it's working with this text layer. It's appearing through this text layer, right? And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to create this shape layer, is so that I can get my text working with this shape layer, so that my text can appear through that shape layer. And I'll show you why in a couple of seconds. So remember that little position property that we introduced into the scene a little earlier. I'm gonna move forward in time to around 16 frames or 20 frames, and then I'm gonna basically set a keyframe there, and then I'm gonna move backwards in time just like we did in the last project, and then I'm gonna take my text just below that floor layer. Just to round it off for peace of mind, I'm gonna drop that position number to 70, right? So the text now is disappearing, and this is because of the shape layer that we created. So now the text, it appears through that shape layer, but where the shape layer is not there, the text disappears, right? So that's a cool thing that we can do with this animation. And then under our range selector again, we're gonna go to our 20 frames when our text is kind of animated, and we're gonna offset that to 100%. And then we're gonna go backwards in time in 4 seconds, just like in the previous project where we kind of offset this to -100, but this time we're gonna take only 100%, and that's because we don't want the additional movements that are happening in between -100 and 100. So this time we only want to start it at 0. We only want to see that individual movement of the text going up, right? And then so now if I play this slowly, you've got each letter animating on its own independently into the scene. So if I just do that, and then you can see now you've got like a nice snazzy text of like letters kind of like sliding in from the bottom, animating into the scene, right? And you can mess around if you go under advanced. There are these easy highs and easy low options here, and you can crank that up to 100% if you want, and it'll give you a more snappy look to your text animation. So it's all about what you want to do here. You can just keep experimenting with easy low as well, and take that to -100 and just go crazy with your text animation. So yeah, so this is the second option of what you can do with your next text-based animation project. And for the third one, what we can do obviously is to toggle down on our drop down menu, and then we can add some tracking properties, and then I can also add maybe a scale property, right? So now what this will do is that it'll help me kind of animate my scale, and it'll also help me animate my tracking animation features. So what that means is that the space in between my letters, I can control that. I can control how wide or how thin I want it to be, right? So I'm gonna start with my tracking, and I'm gonna maybe exaggerate this a little bit more and take it to 5 seconds, and then I'm gonna expand that maybe to something like 30, right? I'm just gonna jump in there, type 30, and then I'm gonna move backwards in time, and then I'm gonna start with my scale and say maybe I want everything to be animated before the first second, so at 20 frames, and then I'll move backwards in time to 4 frames, and then I will animate everything down to 0, right? So now I've got 4 keyframes in my timeline, and I can see the animation that is being created here, right? So I'll just select both my scale keyframes there and go ease them, and then I will jump into my graph editor, and I will say for this animation specifically, I want it to start very fast and kind of slow down to the last value. So towards the last value, the animation will kind of slow down a little bit. and that is only for the scale animation, of course. And if I play that back, you'll see that the text kind of like animates, kind of like scales up into the scene, and then it starts expanding a little bit. So maybe I can exaggerate that a little bit more to something like 50, right? And let's play that back. So that's what happens. Cool. And you can ease these as well if you choose to, and start messing around with the graph to kind of get it do what you want. So what I would want this to do is to kind of like scale in slowly, and then when it gets to the middle it goes fast, and then it slows down again towards the end. So that's what I want mine to do. You can get yours to do whatever you want. You can get it to, you can even have it as linear if you want, where the value over time doesn't change of how far your kerning basically is between each letter. So this is how mine is looking, and I'm kind of digging it, and I like how the text kind of like scales up first and then starts dispersing towards the end of the animation. And if you want, you can obviously take this a little bit further. And for example, I'm just going to illustrate something quickly where I can start maybe making this a little bit more dramatic, and maybe I'll just go with like a silver touch, kind of like that, silverish, grayish. And then I can add something like, let's see what we can add here. Under generate, maybe something like a light sweep. Okay, let's go with a light sweep for now. So instantly you can see that it's introducing some interesting looks there into the scene, but I'm kind of not liking the angle, so I'll go with this one. Yeah, so that kind of works for me, and I'm just going to increase the intensity a little bit to something like 150, right? So it's more established in my text, so you can see the highlights there, right? And maybe I can start animating it around this time, so at after 2 seconds, just after 2 seconds. So maybe when it's there, and then I'll set up a keyframe there, and then up to the time the animation ends, there'll be a swoop of light that goes over my text, kind of. And all I've done here is just press U so that I can see all the keyframes that are on my timeline. Basically, I'm just going to select that and ease that. Cool. So now if I play that back, I can see this little swoop of animation kind of going through my text. Okay, so this is not a light sweep tutorial per se, but I just want to show you, what you can do to regular stuff like text animation by adding other, little things that can kind of help enhance the look that you're going for, kind of enhance what you're trying to do. So with this light sweep here, right, if I go under light reception, you'll see there's a little bit of a drop down menu there, and at the moment it's on add. If I go to cutout, you'll see that it's kind of basically cutting out all the other layers, all the other parts of the image that are not affected by the highlight. And if you kind of like drag your timeline backwards, you'll see that the swoop, as it animates, it kind of highlights, not just it highlights, but it kind of reveals your text as it goes. So that's another feature I guess you can go for when you're trying to animate text, and you can just like have your text kind of revealing itself through a light sweep. And you can always obviously adjust your settings and kind of increase how wide you want it to be, and basically how much of the effect you want to see into your text. But I'll leave that up to you to kind of explore and play with as you want. But as for me, as for now, I'll just go with add, and yeah, and basically that will be a third option of text animation that you can kind of do on your own for your next text animation project. And for our fourth text animation, which is interesting to look at, also looks like it has been given like a considerable amount of effort, but it's actually really easy to create, is the one where we kind of like go under our text properties here, also under animate. We're gonna choose tracking one more time, and then we're gonna add something like opacity also, right? So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna head over to my tracking values here, and I'm gonna set that to -50, and you'll see that kind of like clamps everything together at the center of the frame, which is kind of not looking very good at this point. But if I go under my range selector and adjust, kind of like click on my start keyframe there at 0 frames, and then I move forward in time to like 16 frames, I kind of set my start to 100%. So that's all you're gonna have to animate with this animation kind of idea. All you have to do, kind of just animate the start keyframe under range selector, and you're pretty much done. So you can head over to your opacity that you've added before, and you'll see that your text kind of disappears at the beginning of your frame, but as you scrub through the timeline, it kind of brings back the text that was already on there. So very simple animation, but I think it comes in handy in those situations where you want to create something that looks good, but you don't have the time to kind of do it. So that's basically our fourth option of what you can do with text. So moving on into our fifth and final text animation is the kind of effect where it looks like the text that's been written onto the screen. So the first thing you do with this kind of text animation is that you want to left click on your text, and you want to pre-compose your text, and you can call it whatever you want at this point. And then I'm just going to call mine right, and click on OK on my text composition, and then you'll see that the text has been kind of transported into this composition layer. And now I can start with basically making my right effect. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, and then I'm going to grab my pen tool here at the top, and then I'm going to start going over my text, basically as if like I'm trying to write text with this pen tool, because that's the kind of effect that I'm going for. So do keep in mind that you need to keep like one seamless mask or path throughout your text. So make sure that you don't create multiple paths by accident. So you want to make sure that your effect works. So that's kind of like how you make sure. So you just keep drawing your masks. I'm just gonna briefly fast forward through this process so that you don't have to sit there watching me go through each letter. So as soon as you're done creating your masks all over your text, you can just go here into effect, and then under generate, you just have to find a stroke. You just click on stroke, and then it'll create this little pop-up menu here on your effects panel, and all you have to do is next to paint style here, just say reveal original image, and then you'll see instantly that it kind of messes up your composition, and instead of your nice font, you've got these like little weird lines trying to create text basically kind of thing. Don't freak out, because that's just the paths basically. So the text that was on your composition is appearing through this path, and it's showing you what is supposed to be on your timeline. So if you just increase the brush size on your effects panel, maybe take that to so it works differently with different fonts, because other fonts tend to be thinner, and in this case mine is a bit bigger, so I'm just gonna go with something like 15. And as soon as that is done, I'm gonna basically move forward in time. I think realistically it would take around maybe 3 seconds to write this word Constantine. Yeah, more or less 3 seconds. It would take me 3 seconds. So, so yeah, that's what I want the end frame to look like. So I'm gonna set a keyframe at 3 seconds, or just a little bit above 3 seconds. In my case, it's 3 seconds, and it's just 8 frames after 3 seconds. And then I'm gonna move backwards in time at 0 frames, and then I'm gonna set that to 0, right? So basically this is how long I think it would take for someone to write that text. And if I do press my play button, you'll see that the text will kind of like start animating onto the screen as if somebody's writing it. And you can easy ease your keyframes if you want. That obviously will kind of control the speed of how these letters are being written. And you can create like a motion blur look on your text, and all you have to do by that is just to select this little these little circles that are on there. And yeah, basically that is it.
And that's all I got for you today. If you learned anything new, do like and subscribe for more content. Check me out on the gram and the Twitter bird. Do say hi, and feel free to send some suggestions my way of what you'd like to see in the future. Till then, stay in motion, keep it moving. Peace out.